Hello, this is Alex Birkett, and you are listening to the Long Game Podcast. This episode is a part of our Kitchen Side series, where we pull back the curtain and show you the behind-the-scenes conversations, debates, strategies, and brainstorming sessions that we have at our agency. We're down one today, so it's just me and David, but today we talked a lot about, everything. We talked about everyday comforts like air conditioning, summertime, apartment quirks. This led us into a weird discussion about good architecture, form, and function. Weirdly, we got into a wider look at craftsmanship, talking and railing against some of the AI slop and kind of assembly line style manufacturing that much of life has seemed to present us, and really why David and I prefer hand-stitched boots, carefully cooked meals, and a well-tailored suit in a world built for speed and convenience. But we do actually talk about SEO, GEO, search landscape in 2025. We walk through a framework that I developed, basically be the source, be included in the source, or replace the source framework for LLM optimization. A broader note, we talk about brand gravity and off-page saturation, and also look into how multimedia and multiple formats of different websites are playing into visibility, such as YouTube videos, Reddit threads, and even some weird quirks of AI, such as long since archived blog posts showing up in citations and what to do about that. David's also talking about what he's seeing with enterprise clients. I cover a few gray hat temptations and why most loopholes probably won't last. We're playing for the long game here. And we really stress that the most durable SEO wins are still going to come from really the foundations. Great product, clear positioning and messaging, reliable data, and products that people actually recommend. So without further ado, here is the Long Game Podcast.
I might need like a little standalone AC like Ben has.
That was a huge criteria. A lot of New York City buildings are old, so they have the window units of AC.
Yeah.
And for European listeners, they're just going to be fuming because they have no AC.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, like lurid and livid. I don't know what those two mean. Anyway, hot actually, but also hot emotionally, listening to us talk about central AC, which it was a huge criteria for me getting this new apartment. I like a building with character and soul, but I also cannot stand being hot, especially when I go to sleep.
When I lived in Dublin for 6 months, I didn't realize how lucky I was. I was there because of a HubSpot assignment, and they put me up in corporate housing and all of that and covered it, which I was very grateful for. And I had AC. It was one of those more modern buildings. And when I was telling locals about where I was staying, they're like, "You have air conditioning?" I was like, "Yeah, is that not normal?" And they're like, "No, it's not." So I immediately felt extra privileged.
Dublin's a lot different though, isn't it? It's got a lot more like new modern mid-rise and high-rise apartments and stuff because of all the tech companies.
But I think it was because I was staying in the area around all the tech companies where it was a bit more modern than like the other like suburbs. Pretty much.
I feel like it's kind of like a paradox or like hypocrisy for myself because I tend to disdain like the IKEA, the Starbucks, the WeWork, the slopification, the medianification of the world. You know what I mean? Like this soulless, like fucking everything looks the same. Everything's built to be temporary. Swipe on Hinge, order on DoorDash. Fuck you. There's no soul. But I love an apartment that is set up for the modern times.
You like your comforts.
Yes, 100%. Oh man, maybe someday I'll have one of those like bucolic old homes out in the country of the hills where like you get a little like breeze rolling through in the summertime and it's not like fully insulated and the walls are thick and you like the place we stayed in Italy. Remember?
Yeah.
Well, our romantic adventure in Italy.
Romantic 3-week adventures staying in this old ass place. I think those places, I appreciate architecture a bit more as I'm older now. Like I've been to, I was going to say girlfriend, but now fiance's home in California, and they don't have heating or AC in the house, but it's always like cold. Like it's nice. And I'm like, why is it built? Why does it always feel this way? And clearly someone was very thoughtful about the positioning and the angle and like which ways, where the windows are and like blocking out the sun and all that. I think that's what we had in Italy where it was kind of like just cold all the time in the building.
I don't know enough about this stuff, but there probably is something about like building design and architecture and like how things used to be built or something like that with the insulation and shadows and how the sun, factors into it. I'm sure there's something there.
Yeah.
I wonder with all of this digital life and VR and AI stuff, like if there's going to be some sense of at least like some wedge of a backlash. Backlash sounds like too strong of a word, but are we going to revere things that are beautiful just for the sake of being beautiful or well built or well made? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you love clothes, and I love especially jackets and boots that have that sense of craftsmanship where it's like you go to whoever you buy it from, and the same jacket design might be slightly different person to person. Like it might have some variance. Like it's not like an assembly line style, like quality assurance, like McDonald's style type thing. Yeah. Like I love that stuff, but I wonder if there's, I don't know, it invokes some sense of like human, like error and humanity, doesn't it?
It must. I mean, we've talked about this before, where maybe the pendulum is swinging over a little bit, where everything was super optimized and so convenient, and I'm starting to see trends of people opting out of some of that stuff. I recently reinstalled Instagram, and I'm getting hit with these. First of all, I'm getting a lot of posts of people I'm not following, which I'm like, who the hell is this person? But I got hit with this post of tech workers who have left tech to move to Japan, like the countryside of Japan. That's the thing people do now because they're tired of this quote fast-paced life and being online all the time, and they just want to go live in countryside on a farm and have some goats or something.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's happening in parallel with this move towards wanting more of these craftsman-like pieces that aren't mass produced and last a long time, and there's a story behind it or something.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I'm tying all of that together.
I was going to say I've got two minds there and two stories or anecdotes, I suppose. But I always listen to full albums when I do long walks in the park. I try to listen more intentionally, so it's not like background slop that's just like zoning out and like blurring into the background. And I was listening to Black Sabbath the other day. Ozzy Osbourne, right? And on War Pigs, you can kind of hear, he's obviously an amazing vocalist, but like you can hear there's like cracks in the voice sometimes. And like there's sometimes where he doesn't hit the note right away, but then he kind of adjusts like in real time and you hear those nuances. And I really enjoyed that.
Was it a live recording or like that's the actual album?
No, it's the album recording. Like you can tell that he is like in the studio singing with very little post production editing, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just, you can imagine him singing in the studio versus, and I don't want to like talk smack. I'm sure like they have great songwriters and stuff, but the Taylor Swift, Sabrina Carpenter, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just very like, you could
very polished.
I'm going to make people mad. You could make it with AI if you really wanted to, And look, I'm nobody to talk. I love A$AP Ferg. So I'm not like the highest highbrow music taste. The other side of that, I was going to say.
What was the second thing?
Well, we have a mutual friend, and I don't want to throw him on the spot here, but he was talking about leaving his company and looking into new roles and figuring out what he wants to do next. I was at his boyfriend's birthday party, and he's like, "Yeah, I looked into being a plumber, actually. I was thinking about like just leaving tech entirely and doing like a trade because who knows what's going to happen with AI." And I was like, "Oh, that's interesting. Like I've thought similar, not seriously, but in the back of my mind, I'm like working with my hands, da 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 da. So like, what conclusion did you come to?" And he's like, "Well, it turns out it's really hard work. Being a plumber is really hard. So I'm not going to do that."
Yeah, people talk about how plumbers make a lot of money, but I don't think I've heard people say how hard it is.
Well, just think about all, our non-calloused, soft-handed tech worker. We are sitting in air-conditioned offices, typing on Slack, doing meetings. It's like, it's very different to do real work. I think a lot of people are probably not actually cut out for it. Like dispositionally,
I go back and forth because when I was younger, I would like once a month, for example, clean my car by hand on my own with a hose and a bucket of car washing soap. And now I just go through the car wash. Like, should I be invoking some more sort of manual labor in my life?
Oh, do you cook?
I do. Yes.
I think that's an important thing. There was a big debate on X. Somebody posted about the Norman Rockwell painting meme, where it's like a controversial opinion. It's like standing up at this like PTA meeting or something like that.
Oh yeah.
My brain thinks in memes.
Is that what it's called?
Sorry.
Norman
Well, Norman Rockwell is a painter and it was his painting. But they've used this as a meme to basically say like unpopular opinion. And this person was like, it's more affordable to eat out than it is to cook, right? Which arguably it could be if I think if you're like not regularly cooking, right? Because most people have like pantry staples and spices and all of that stuff. But like if you went out to cook a meal that had 19 ingredients, that meal might cost more than just buying something from, the halal truck down the street.
Yeah.
Anyway, there was a lot of debate around this. And one person was like, there's something important about the soul of preparing the food that you consume. Right. And there's obviously like a longer value chain that people talk about with hunting or fishing and like kind of like living off the land type of thing. And I've had some experience with that. Obviously, I'm, in a small box apartment in New York City, so I'm not doing a lot of that now. But there's something intangibly nice about putting craft into something that you're consuming. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I have a story on that, and it's quite embarrassing. And at some point, we'll talk about AI and geo or whatever. But I've been thinking a lot about this idea because we talked about this over the weekend, like this idea of just like kind of being stressed about something and like putting in the effort and the feeling of worrying and wanting it to go well. And I've been thinking about this a lot because I reflect on this moment a lot because it's very embarrassing. But I remember one of the first potlucks I've ever went to. It was a Thanksgiving potluck. I wasn't really learning how to cook at the time. I didn't know how to cook or bake because I didn't put in effort. And I got a pumpkin pie from a supermarket and I brought that. And then when I got there, I realized everyone had put in the effort to cook dishes for this potluck. And I felt so shitty about myself. And part of it is ignorance, but the other part was not putting in the effort to show that I care about this gathering of people. And I think about that a lot because when I think about all these things that we're doing and like you've talked about convenience and like even just the cooking, there is a certain soulful aspect of putting in that effort and showing that you care where I'm just going to tie this to like content SEO. People don't fucking care anymore. Like it's just like a lot of slop and it's like easy to do. It's convenient. Just go prompt this thing and like produce these tens of thousands of pages or whatever, but there's no thoughtfulness or soulfulness or like care into who's receiving.
Yeah.
Who's on the other end of all this stuff that's being created.
Or who's on the creating end.
Yeah.
Something I've been thinking about is there's this old clip from Tyler, the Creator, who's talking about, I don't know how old this is, but he's talking about young bucks talking about their favorite rappers and rap albums. And he's like, oh, I hate it when they're like, oh, my favorite are Ready to Die and Enter the Wu-Tang. And he's like, stop it. You're being performative. Like you're answering what people think you should say. Like, I want to know what you like and why you like it. Like maybe it has some sentimental value for you, but it's not objectively the best album. It's subjectively. It's like your thing.
Yeah.
Right. Like I want to hear that. Right. Like, and I feel like that kind of doesn't come through as much anymore with the content that we're seeing online.
Yeah. And I don't know, maybe part of it is an aspect of wanting to cover your ass or not put yourself out there and be vulnerable. Because, I mean, if everyone's doing a certain thing, you're going to feel some pressure to also do that thing. In this case, it's producing a lot of slop or like at a high velocity and hard to keep up a fast pace if you're trying to be thoughtful and soulful about everything. But I think that's the stuff that stands out now.
Yeah. I was thinking about this with, so I wrote like let's say a romantic note recently. And I wrote a bunch of notes to people that we were sending magazines to. And like, I could ostensibly have used ChatGPT to help me craft like a note, and that would be less vulnerable. And I'm not saying like I was super vulnerable in all these letters. Like they were just to clients in business context, but I specifically didn't do it. And I didn't even open my computer. I just sat down with like a pen and the notes because I wanted to feel what I wanted to say. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Like I wanted it to spring from my natural inclinations versus having it be crafted by something outside of me.
Yeah. And I also, I mean, this is very different from like the professional side. Maybe there's some overlap, but I also want to feel what it feels like to write those words down.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
the processing of these thoughts and like, oh yeah, I care a lot about what I want to say to this person versus telling GPT to write me a nice note to someone.
Yeah, for sure. Not to say that we're not fully avid GPT users.
Oh, I use it all the time
because it's such a dichotomy of man. You know, it's like there's this part of me that loves the soulful, slow from the soul aspects. You know, and then the other part, I've been using GPT extensively. Like literally, I'm trying it for almost everything I do professionally, just as a test to see like if it's functional in that use case, which we had talked about a couple sessions ago. So I don't think we need to recap that, but just genuinely like, oh, I'm creating a course. Like, can I use this as an evaluative function to like basically give me feedback and like, you know, inject interactive engagement ideas, or is that something that I would have to go ask you, David, about? Like, you know, could I use that for X purpose? And like often the answer is yes. And in shocking ways with the work that we do for SEO and content.
Yeah, I've been using it for a lot more things. And the unlock that I found is asking it for help thinking through stuff, or like, hey, how should I approach this problem? Like, here's how I'm currently thinking about it, versus using it for like the generative aspect of like producing. It's more of what are my blind spots? Here's how I'm thinking about it. What am I missing? Can you pull from sources where people have talked about doing this before? Or I'll even tell it to like poke holes in my thinking and tell me where I'm wrong. And sometimes
I worry about that. I had an argument with a friend, Ryan Baum, about this because everybody talks about using it as a strategic thought partner, but like the base like bias that GPT has is it absorbs your preferences in a very like latent way, and Ryan was like, oh well, I just like prompt it and I asked it to be very blunt and very like, you know, don't say what I want to say. But then I'm like, yeah, but it's still learning like what you think you want it to not say, but you do want it to say. Like it's still the most dangerous thing about LLMs is how persuasive they are. They will convince you that they are on track. And I worry about that sometimes with the strategic thought partner.
Yeah.
Not to say I don't use it for the same purposes from time to time, but that's one that I haven't really settled on.
Yeah, it is.
Do you almost think that it's just valuable, like typing out your questions and like kind of
I do.
having like a back and forth, even if it's a virtual thing?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Because there are some times when I'm writing, I'm trying to prompt it and I go pretty in depth sometimes. And I'm like, wait, what do I mean by that? And I have to think through what I'm trying to communicate. But it is strange, right? Because I find that I sometimes go to it for validation for ideas. It's when we think about what we're doing in terms of optimizing for LLMs and helping clients do that, it's kind of tapping into that almost inherent trust in these tools. Like, oh, they validated me. Surely I'm in the right, or surely I'm thinking about this correctly.
And maybe that's not a bad thing. It kind of depends where on the spectrum you lie, from like extreme imposter syndrome and insecurity to like overconfidence and grandiosity, which is like on that the latter end, like maybe that would be a very dangerous thing to have GPT just be like, no, you're good. Like totally do that. Right.
Yeah, definitely. Can definitely like, take over the world.
Did you see the one where it advised like an addict to say like, hey, you should have a little meth. You deserve it. Like,
no.
This was a real case. Yeah. Like GPT was basically like counseling an addict.
Oh my God.
And advised this person to take a little meth.
I don't even know what to say to that.
I mean, there's always going to be extreme cases like that. That one was obviously just like out there, but yeah, I mean, sometimes what I've found people want, you know, like the feedback is the breakfast of champions thing. I think sometimes people want feedback, but I think a lot more often, especially if somebody's more junior in their career, what they really want is validation and a confidence boost to say like, you're good. This is good.
Yeah.
Like, it just let it rip. It's totally good. Do you know what I mean?
And I do think more people need that versus being criticized all the time.
So I don't necessarily think that's always, a bad thing. Dude, also, I just want to say, like, there's a lot of information out there in the ecosystem right now. I did try to go through LinkedIn and see what the common conversation is. Unfortunately, LinkedIn's algorithm seems to be only putting things that are 2 to 3 weeks old on the timeline right now.
Oh.
Which I'm not the only one. I saw a post about this, joking about it. Ironically, because that post was from today, but everything else was 2 weeks ago. So that one cut through. So anyway, I don't know what people are talking about, but I've been so focused on GEO and figuring it out from our own nuts and bolts and operations, and then teaching this course for CXL and how do I explain this to a highly variable audience with multiple different industries and like skill levels within this sphere, and then sales. So I've been really like navel gazing or whatever the word is. Like I've been really like,
I don't know if that's the right word.
Navel gazing is a little bit more narcissistic, right? That's when you're just really like,
I think so,
obsessed with the shit that you're working.
I don't fully understand that saying, but yeah.
Shoe gazing is different. Shoegazing is a style of music. What is navel gazing? Self-indulgent, excessively contemplative of oneself. So it's like people who, anyway. So I'm not navel gazing, but I've been very like focused on what's at hand versus what's in the market and what conversations are happening.
Yeah,
and I think that's actually very healthy. It also makes it hard to run a podcast.
Well, I think that's interesting because obviously GEO's top of mind for a lot of people, and you brought up sales, and I mean, it's been helping me start conversations with folks who probably wouldn't have had a conversation with us because folks are in a position where they need to have answers on what they're doing with GEO. And I think it'd be great if you shared what high-level frameworks you've developed through the CXL course. And if anyone's listening, they should definitely go take that course. Is it async?
It's a cohort. No, they can't take it.
Okay.
Yeah. Take
Sign
it
up for the
time.
wait list.
I'm going to ramble a little bit so we can pick this apart how we'd like. But I'll start with the course itself, which I had modeled after basically this idea that nobody really has like a silver bullet answer, which shouldn't be surprising because technically in SEO, nobody really had like the true causal input output linear correlation kind of answer either. But I wanted to inform it to basically be 1 foot in the present and 1 foot in the future and to not get entirely tilted, because this is a prediction and I'm not usually one to make grandiose predictions, but I actually think that the systems are converging, and eventually GEO is just going to be, I guess, the first layer of like how people interact with information. Like AI mode, I just see the trends and I see like click-through rates declining over the years and featured snippets and like people wanting to solve for Delphic costs, which is essentially like a cognitive load. So instead of having a user go through like 5 clicks, having 1 click and information more quickly available, that's kind of like the explicit aim of Google, at least, and I think ChatGPT as well. So I think it's all going to be organic growth. I don't think there's going to be GEO and SEO in the future. There are divergent patterns right now. So in the course, I talked a lot about both. So building robust concepts, things like being a credible source, because it's important to be a credible source, to be cited in the citation sources, especially with the search functionality in ChatGPT, AI mode, perplexity, right? Because then you can inform the outputs. How do you become a credible source? There's a bunch of different variables. We had talked about that research, the Generative Engine Optimization paper put out last year. There's slight differences in terms of how LLMs seem to extract credibility and how Google does, but generally the EAT stuff, right? But that's one of those where it's like, are you going to regret being a credible source and doing the things to invoke credibility? Probably not. And then the second concept was around proprietary data and specifically adding unique value to the world. So the thesis being that consensus information is more easily summarized, and not just summarized, but created. So anybody with a ChatGPT subscription can basically create the same content that's already out there on what is marketing automation. So then your job, if you believe creating value is ultimately going to bring value back to your company or your brand, is to create something net new on top of that, which people call information gain. There's a technical term for information gain, but I use it very colloquially to say like what additional information and clarity are you adding to a subject? And then I talked a lot about original research and how you can pull, product data or market survey data or micro case studies or even using product-led experiences like user-generated templates and libraries to create unique value that didn't exist before. And then the last one is about brand gravity. And that was the one that I think is the highest leverage for LLMs and the highest signal right now, which is essentially the surround sound SEO strategy on steroids in that especially the search functionality of ChatGPT, you can see the sources that it's using, the citations that it's pulling from, and to be included on more and more of those, especially in relation to categorical phrases, things that imply shopping intent. I'm looking for a product that helps me do X, Y, and Z. I'm looking for an alternative to Salesforce that integrates with whatever product. They're highly specific now, but it's like a probabilistic heuristic. It's like if you're on none of those, I don't see how feasibly you could be in the output as a recommendation. And if you're on a few of those, I just think logically, I don't have a paper to back this up, but you have less likelihood of appearing regularly for prompts like that. And if you're on all of them, you have a high likelihood, right? So the idea is to build brand gravity to become sort of a consensus option or an obvious choice in relation to a given category. And that's kind of all the off-page stuff. So that's how I set up the course. All things that if you did them today and nothing changed about the future of SEO, you wouldn't regret doing any of those things.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, that last point on brand gravity. We've had a couple prospects that we're talking to. Some of them are public enterprise companies, and they're asking for help with showing up in LLM outputs. And I'll put them into Peak.ai. Guess what? They're on like 80% of the cited sources because they're such a well-known household brand. I'm like, well, you're already doing quite well. You don't need to do too much, to be honest, because people know of you and what you're already on all these listicles and these cited sources. But if you want to go into a new market or improve your positioning and be known for a particular use case in a specific industry, yeah, we can help there and help you get more specific. But if you want to go after this high level category, you're already dominating. And so I think that'll play into what exactly these enterprise companies' strategies are, like what the purpose is.
I think that there's an interesting strategic differentiation with how most people do SEO that you just alluded to or implied, which is the expansion beyond head terms or like broad categories. Mm-hmm. So I'm guessing these enterprise companies, you would put in maybe the most obvious categories, so like LMS systems or CMS software, so whatever like the highest level term is. But I'm guessing that a lot of companies still have gaps when it comes to very specific, highly personalized questions, mm-hmm. such as persona data. I'm a 10-person company. I have this budget and I need it to integrate with Pipedrive. They may have that information, but I think that's where it gets really interesting, because instead of using keywords to dictate your strategy and your roadmaps and your content coverage, you're starting to use, or hopefully people are starting to use more voice of customer data mm-hmm. that you can mine and extract and synthesize from customer research broadly, but like sales transcripts, gong calls, customer support transcripts, even just product usage data, just understanding like what segments are getting the most use out of your product and like what information you should surface from a product marketing perspective. That's where I see some of that becoming more interesting, actually.
I'm finding myself parroting the framework that you shared, and I won't steal your thunder and I'll let you share it, but this kind of framework that I'm going to use a redundant sentence. It's a framework that helps frame how to think about GEO and the various levers that you have available to influence these outputs. So you talk about the three frameworks, because I think it's like very clear and simple and easy to understand. And you did a really great job putting this together so that people can think of these 3 bullet points and then ask themselves, okay, which one can we do now? Which one's most feasible? And like, what are the things that are going to be a bit more difficult to do?
Yeah. And just as a quick aside, I got to tell you that one of the reasons it's so important to do courses and public speaking like this I had to think, how do I translate this to an audience that's not thinking about it day in, day out like we are? And I can't use an esoteric, like jargony framework. I have to use something that most people could understand, conceptualize, and then come up with their own creative execution for. So everybody is saying brand mentions are the new backlinks. And that's what we mean when we say brand gravity or surround sound SEO or off-page saturation. Essentially being mentioned in relation to contextual cues, categorical themes, topics that you care about is impacting the outputs to these systems. But I think it's a little bit hand-wavy to say, okay, go build your brand or go get some brand mentions. It's like, how? Especially for an SEO whose main purview has sort of been like on-page SEO and technical SEO, really tweaking small variables to optimize for channel delivery, to start suddenly thinking like a digital PR or public relations professional mixed with a brand marketer, mixed with a product marketer. It's conceptually difficult to think like, well, how do I get mentioned?
It's a big jump.
Yeah. Exactly. So the model that I came up with is basically be the source, be included in the source, or replace the source. You've got a set of sources, and ideally you can create content that it pulls from directly, because then you can own the narrative. You can construct your messaging how you want it to be described. And often it's going to pull proprietary information from the source. It wants to use your product page to explain what your product does, right? So you should have a product page that explains what your product does using the language that people are prompting. That's the first layer. Step 0 is basically, do we have coverage in all the key areas? And typically those formats are going to be resembling either product pages generally or category pages. And then maybe as a segment of that, use case, persona, industry, kind of a splintering of the core kind of categorical phrases or pages and product pages. And then lists. So either alternatives lists, comparison lists, or basically product category lists, like best software lists. I think product documentation is often playing into these things. People are searching for things like, oh, it needs to integrate with this, or it needs to have SOC 2 compliance built in, blah, 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 blah. So do you have documentation related to those things? And then I think proof points. So that would include original research, especially first-party product data, but then also case studies, customer libraries, et cetera. So those are the commonly included patterns there. And then be included in the source. That's really where the outreach comes in, and the digital PR and kind of the partner marketing. But basically, you can see with the probabilities of how often they're used, what sources are cited within ChatGPT, in AI mode, in Perplexity, and you can kind of stack rank those based on if some source is showing up 50% of the time in relation to a key prompt or a set of prompts related to a topic, and we're not included, well, let's go try to get included. And then we can talk about tactics there. I think that's where the fun stuff comes in. Everybody thinks like, oh, I'll just send an outreach email. Oh, no, you can get way more creative. Like, this is where it's so fun to think about, should I send them champagne? Should I bring them to a Mets game? should I trade? Like, what's the deal here? But you're trying to inform the source and get included in the already existing information that to a high degree of probability is going to be included in those prompts. And then the last one is kind of the least predictable, but there's no rule, like scientific rule of like gravity that says these 50 sources are forever and always going to be the sources that ChatGPT pulls from. That's probably like the least known variable. And I know there's research from Profound that says Wikipedia cited a ton and Reddit cited a ton. That's just across the broad swath of like millions of prompts, right? Like, of course, those are cited often because they're authoritative sources, right? And they're informational sources. But like within your lane or your industry vertical, you're going to see a bunch of different sources, and there's often gaps, or like they're not perfect sources. So by that, I mean working with partners or off-page publications to basically usurp the existing sources to create better information. And a really cool example of that is if you have user-generated content. We used to work with a company who worked with their influencers and their product users to create a bunch of YouTube videos. And now those are very commonly pulled in AI citations. So I would include that to like replace the source option.
Yeah. It's interesting because the pattern keeps coming up where I'll talk to a prospect or a client. And again, I use the same framework. You can be the source, create owned assets, content on your site, very straightforward. You can be included in existing sources, so lots of outreach, or you can try to replace the source and create some new format of content or improve on what's already out there. And in almost all the cases, there's gaps in coverage. And it's as simple as starting with figuring out what those gaps are in producing content. I'm also noticing YouTube being pulled in a lot, where I spoke to a previous client about how they were getting cited and their visibility. And I saw that there were a lot of YouTube's videos that were cited, and they weren't included in any of those because they were YouTube videos from their competitors.
Oh, interesting.
Talking about the product category. And so I said, hey, you have this content in written form on your website. So the topical coverage is there, but you don't have coverage in the format of where these sites, what's being cited and where people are potentially looking for this information. And you already have a YouTube channel, which right now is just publishing the webinars that you have. But imagine if you turn this blog post, you already kind of have a script, or put it in the ChatGPT to turn into a script, have the same people who are already producing these videos just produce a video on a very similar topic, and it's actually quite low lift. And so that's one of those cases where I think there might be some nuance between like be the source versus replace the source.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, it's actually, hey, your competitors are doing this. You want to replace them. Produce content that's similar to this. That's better.
Yeah. I think there's probably maybe confusion about what those two could mean. Be the source. I'm just like, all right, web content that's going to serve as first source information. Like this is where, the source itself is telling me what they do. That's really interesting on the YouTube stuff. I like that because you had mentioned it's low lift, but it's also an obvious, like it's going to be beneficial even if ChatGPT shut down today, right? Like YouTube is still a major platform to find users, and it's kind of a search engine in its own right. So if your competitor is showing up there, like it's obviously beneficial for you to do the same,
Yeah.
So that's one of those. I look at decision making is hard. It's always hard, but now with everything changing, one thing that I often ask myself is like, would this be a smart decision in absence of AI optimization? Like, if it sounds wacky, it might be worth doing as an experiment, but in most cases, you want to root things in generally good principles anyway. And that's like, create video content about our product.
Yeah, what I'm finding is most of it isn't new. It's just yet another reason to do the things you probably should have already been doing. So another enterprise company, big legal team, lots of concerns about talking about competitors. And when we worked with them a year and a half ago, the pushback they had was, hey, we can't mention competitors in our content. Like our legal team doesn't want that. There's risks. In my mind, it's not real risks, but that's a different conversation. And I spoke to them recently about how they want to show up in LLMs. One, they want to show up, period. Two, they want to show up and position it correctly. And I think a couple of podcast episodes ago, I was talking about how their positioning was just old. So what was shown in GPT was their old positioning and not what they wanted, how they wanted to be framed. But the other piece was, hey, if people search for your product versus your competitors, you're not showing up as a source. Your competitors are showing up as sources, and these startups who are willing to produce this type of like competitive content and talk about their product versus all these other products in the market, they're showing up as a source. And if on your site you have this positioning and they write about that, they write about your product in that way and compare it to their product and how their product is better, that's going to be what controls the narrative and what ultimately gets pulled into these LLM outputs, but just by nature of how they work. And so I'm hoping for a lot of other companies who are quite resistant or scared of producing this type of content, if you don't produce it, the folks that are producing are going to be the ones that influence how your brand shows up in these outputs. And if it's your competitors, you probably don't want that.
I think, JH talked about this, but we had also brought this up a few episodes ago. Great minds think alike. But he talked about online reputation management making a big comeback. And I think for enterprise companies, that's going to be a huge issue, is not only how often we're appearing, but like, is the information accurate? up to date, and to our liking? Like, does it map to what our product marketing team wants the story to be about how we're going to market?
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, I do think, I'll be transparent, I think there's a lot of ways that you can game these systems right now. I've deliberately not talked about them. I think there are quite obvious ways that you can tweak these things. I don't think that's going to be the long arc of how they work. I just think like incentive alignment, like you're going to see these loopholes being closed. And over the long arc, I actually see the most effective things being the hardest to fake and the most just authentic signals. Because ultimately, like if you think of that enterprise company and they're not creating the content that's necessary, let's say they've even got like some misaligned or poor positioning and messaging on their site that's being pulled in. There's other sources that are going to be pulled in, like review sites and Reddit, and those are eminently less controllable. I mean, there's, again, ways you can game it, but ultimately it might be pulling in testimonials and reviews that are negative towards your product and product experience. And the only effective way to really remediate that over the long run is to improve your product and product experience.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like, people are going to shit talk about you on Reddit, and you can hire a Reddit marketing agency to possibly inject some like fake accounts and like clean that up. But I don't know. I feel like that's a short-term tactic, and the long-term play is to have better customer support or you know, have a better product.
Yeah.
I think those things are going to win out in the end. It's like Stefan from CXL said this. He's like, ultimately, if people aren't recommending you, LLMs aren't going to.
Yeah.
And that's not true in like the absolute truth sense. Like you can, again, game these systems, but I think it's true in the useful sense, in that, like, is your brand and product worth mentioning?
Yeah.
And if it's not, well, fucking fix that. Like, don't worry about LLM optimization, you know?
Yeah, it reminds me of another conversation I had where it's a well-known e-commerce platform that's having a lot of challenges in the press over the last year, probably longer. And they came to us and they said, hey, we'd like help improving the way that our brand is presented in GPT and the types of phrases that they know are being searched is like, is brand legit? Is brand safe? And things like that. And GPT doesn't even take that long to provide an output. It's actually pretty quick, and what it returns is not very favorable. And I think of a lot of these brands where there's just been years of these negative reviews that it's going to take a lot to clean that up. And the other part is, well, maybe this actually has to do with the product and your platform. And maybe there's some, like, it's not just messaging and positioning, it's actually how do you improve what the product and the service is so that this doesn't happen anymore. Because maybe you clean up all that historical stuff, but if it's still a bad experience, there's going to be even more new negative reviews or comments about it, which are you just going to keep cleaning it up, or do you address it at the root cause?
This is like systems thinking 101, but like the obvious high leverage node is to just fix the root cause. It's just like the one that people don't want to actually deal with, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's
yeah.
like,
I mean, it's hard.
It's like, God, that sounds like a whole lot of hard work. Can't I just spin up an LLMs.txt file and just like call it a day?
Yeah. It's like the equivalent of like, let me just hide all my mess in this closet and like deal with it later.
Seriously. Yeah, it's going to be fun how this stuff evolves. I do think there's a lot of technical components that are quite interesting at this point. Some of the query fanning and vector embeddings and all of that good stuff with regards to content. But then also I think Victor Pan, I don't remember if he shared this or if he reposted it, but it was about LLMs hallucinating URLs. So
yes.
Actually, funny enough, I just was prompting for some sample questions that could relate to this topic that we're going on right now. And it actually hallucinated a URL for an essay that you wrote in 2016. And I was like, that's interesting. I've never seen that essay that David wrote. And I clicked on it and it was a 404 to a medium.com article. Like it didn't exist.
Oh.
So I was like, that's an example right there where I've seen it happen with Ahrefs, like where, you know, I'm doing a newsletter and I'm like, oh, I need sources and like, additional reading to support this. And sometimes it pulls the right info, and then sometimes it'll just make up a blog post. And, people are clicking on those, and it's kind of this interesting question of what you do with that, and a lot of people are saying, all right, well, audit how many times it's happening, like with log files in your analytics.
Yeah.
And then if there's a page that's like 100 sessions a month that doesn't exist, well, all right, maybe like redirect it or add like additional links that relate to that topic that, actually exist, or like there's certain things you can do with that. But there's, outside of like the citation optimization stuff that we're talking about, there are interesting new kind of technical GEO type things that are coming up.
Yeah, that's interesting because it begs the question of why was this fake URL cited in this output? Like, where did it come from?
Where did it come from? Where did it go?
Yeah, I did a Google search on. I was trying to find an article that I was curious if it's the same one, but I was looking for an article I wrote on HubSpot in 2015 or 2016, and Google served up the URL, and I clicked the URL, and it just redirected to just the blog archive. So they unpublished my content, but for some reason it's still showing up on Google.
Interesting.
Very different, but it seems like that's sort of the equivalent of like, oh, well, if this is still appearing in these outputs or Google, what do we do with that?
That's an interesting question. Ali had discovered something similar with a client where it was pulling from a deprecated site. Like the site literally didn't even, the domain had expired. And it was like, I don't know if it was like a cached page that somehow like exists in like a Bing index. I genuinely have no idea how this came up, but it was coming up all the time in citation data against this client's prompts.
Was that like the staging URL that came up or something?
I don't even think it was staging. I think like literally this site existed like 2 years ago and doesn't exist now. And it actually favorably mentioned a competitor. So the question is like, well, what do we do about that? And I think that's where it goes to replace the source, right? Like then you're like, okay, we need to flood it with new information that's better because clearly this is like a shit information. It's like they don't have enough to go off of, but just like a weird, quirky anomaly, right?
Yeah. I wonder how long it's going to last. Surely it's going to get better.
Mm-hmm. I would hope so. I mean, especially with Google and AI mode, like I would assume that they've got such, well, who knows? I'm neither like a Google hater or like a ultimate optimist. I probably fall somewhere in the middle, but like one would assume with their decades of search and information retrieval experience and detecting and punishing spam and all of that stuff, like one would assume that they'd be well poised to figure out that problem.
Yeah.
With even AI mode sitting on top of it. But yeah, obviously it can't keep going on where you're just hallucinating URLs and pulling from outdated cached information, right?
Yeah, that would not be good. This was fun. We talked about craftsmanship, slowing down some manual labor, and then somehow transitioned to GEO and AI.
Yeah. What are you into with craftsmanship nowadays? Like, I know Oak Street Bootmakers is a favorite of both of ours. What else has been on your radar?
I'm into the boots. I'm potentially going to be getting some nice denim again and getting back into that. Probably not the heavyweight stuff anymore because that's like voluntary torture. Like
I couldn't imagine that in like the summertime in New York.
Oh my God,
in
this weather right now? Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you?
I haven't like discovered too much new lately. I'm also much more of a fall and winter kind of guy. Like I like boots and jackets and like kind of heavy gear. But I asked because I'm kind of on the market for like a nice new pair of loafers. And I've bought Oak Street in the past, and it's not like the highest craftsmanship, but like Allen Edmonds is like, I feel like a good just daily driver, like decent quality, not like amazing. But I think I told you this quote. My therapist, I was talking about, I was going to the MoMA for like a garden party, and it's like everybody's dressed really well, and not just well, but it's New York City and it's like an artsy crowd. So I was like all nervous. And he's like, well, that's the cool thing about, like menswear. It's like, you really just need like 3 suits and with clothes, he's like, the rule of thumb is like, whatever you're paying for it now, you should be paying way more. And you should always buy as if it's going to be for life.
Mm-hmm.
And I've started thinking about that a lot more because I think like as a heuristic, that's really good, to really think about like just instead of just getting a new pair of shoes every year, what if I just bought the best pair of shoes right now?
Yeah. I actually inadvertently did that because in college I was very into fashion, and I, for some reason, decided to get like a custom made tailor suit from this like Italian dude in Newport Beach. And he was like this very traditional Italian man. And I remember asking him to make my pants more slim, and he absolutely refused. He was like, I'm not doing that. Like you can ask someone to do that. I'm not doing that. I'm like, cool. And college me was like, oh, but this isn't skinny enough. But I was cleaning out my closet and figuring out what to throw away. And I was just very curious about the quality of this suit. And there isn't much on Google about it. So I took a picture of the tag and like the suit itself and all the whatever I could, uploaded to ChatGPT, and I asked it to tell me what the quality is of all this. And it gave me some information around, hey, based on the tags, it's probably from a boutique tailor. They probably sourced the materials straight from Italy. Like it says that it's this quality number or whatever. I'm like, oh, I didn't know it was pretty good. And it said something like, this is a suit for special occasions, not something you should wear to the office every day. Like, oh, wow, that's very specific. I don't know if it's accurate or not, but it made me actually like want to take care of it a lot more, and think about the different items that I want to now like fill my closet with that meets that standard.
I want to get a couple nice suits, and for different occasions.
We should go suit shopping. You can be like dress shopping. We can have champagne.
We should absolutely do that. Next time you're in New York, let's make a day of it. One last just like tangential point. ChatGPT and AI is really, really useful when you're using images and uploading them and then prompting against those. I'm sure people have talked about this, and I'm sure there's like slight inaccuracies and whatever, but I've done that with so much lately. Like you can even upload food and estimate your macros, and it's like it's not perfect because it can't see the weight of a food, or it can't like see sometimes sauces or something like that. But I know enough about nutrition to say like it's like directionally really useful. And even if you're like putting an outfit together, it can like tell you how to like put better colors together and like what shoes you should buy to like better match this shirt or something like that. It's really useful when you use it, the image tool.
Yeah, I've actually used it. I took a picture of this light that popped up on my car. I was like, instead of going through my car manual, I just took a picture and uploaded to ChatGPT. And I was like, what is this? Told me exactly what it was. I did confirm in my manual that it was correct, but I'm like, wow, I didn't need to flip through 200 pages to find out what this one little light meant.
That's so fun.
It's amazing.
Look at that. ChatGPT solving for Delphic costs.
Making my life much better.
Uh-huh.
All right.
That's good. Wrap?
Yeah.